Yeah, it's hard to believe we're already in week 2. So last week we had our first chapter, and that was really on the origins of evolutionary thought itself. And then this week is where we start moving into the nuts and bolts of how evolution works. And in fact, we call this the mechanisms of evolution, where we're going to go into more detail about natural selection. And we're going to talk about like sexual selection and directional selection, disruptive selection, balancing selection, and of course, frequency dependent selection. So we'll get into these things. And we're also going to learn the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium as well, too. And there's lots of good places on the web to get demonstrations of that. I don't need to repeat what other people have done. Khan Academy is great, and of course the Wikipedia. So your first 2 tests are both due next Sunday. I extended the due date on the first test, so you didn't have to have it done last Sunday. However, if you notice, there's 10 multiple choice questions, and there's 5 essay questions. 4 of those are worth 5 points, and 1 is worth 10 points. Now that 10-pointer means you really need to go into some details here. And let me give you an example of what I'm looking for. And what I'm trying to get you guys to do is move beyond superficial knowledge to a more deeper understanding of the material. Let me give you an example of just using the definition of evolution. We define evolution as like a change in allele frequencies in a population from one generation to the next. Okay, we can all recite that. Every one of us can memorize that statement, and that represents an answer if I ask you what evolution is. And that's great. Now, the difference is, do you actually understand what an allele frequency is and what it means to change an allele frequency? So let's go from I've repeated a statement that I have to regurgitate, a change in allele frequencies in a population from one generation to the next, right? Let's get some understanding here. And this is where the Hardy-Weinberg comes in as well, and understanding how natural selection operates on our allele frequencies. Okay, an allele. Well, that's a variation in a gene, right? There's some really good examples of this. Think about blood types. You've got A blood, B blood, O blood. Those are 3 different alleles for blood type. If you remember Gregor Mendel's experiments where he studied the pea flowers, and you had white flowers and purple flowers, okay? Those are different alleles. Those are different versions of those genes. Now, if you remember, these genes are coding for some type of protein. So when we talk about A, B, and O blood, what that allele really is on the surface of our blood, there's an antigen, and that is used for our body to be able to recognize our blood as self, recognizing self from non-self, right? So A and B represent 2 different types of these surface antigens, and O blood is actually a mutated version of A blood. And then when you look at the purple flower, whether it's purple or white, a white flower is actually a mutated version of the purple flower, and the purple is caused by a pigment called anthocyanin. There's an entire metabolic pathway to make anthocyanin, right? And if you have a white flower, you have a mutation that knocked out some crucial part of that metabolic pathway. Okay, now we're starting to understand what alleles are, right? They're versions of genes, and these genes are making something. Now, not all genes make stuff. There's a lot of regulatory genes as well, but we'll come back to that later on in this. We won't get to that. Okay, now an allele frequency, and I've noticed a lot of people don't always get what an allele frequency is. So if we've got these blood types, you can imagine A, B, and O blood, the frequency of that allele would be how common it is in a population. So an allele frequency might be 33% A, 33% B, 33% O. Now that doesn't mean that everybody in the population is going to have that phenotype. We're just talking about the percentage of that allele, the frequency of it in a population. Or we could also look at our white and purple flowers. Those are represented by alleles. So you might have 75% would be the white allele, and you might only have 25% of the purple allele. Now that does not mean that 25% of the population is going to be purple. In fact, more of the population, about 50%, would be purple because purple is dominant. So that would be an allele frequency. So if we change that allele frequency, let's say we find a a group of flowers and they're following Mendelian genetics where they have purple and white flowers, and the white allele is found in 75% of the population, and the purple is only found in 25% of the population. Turns out the insects like both purple and white flowers, right? And then let's say all of a sudden something happens to the insects in that population, and the one that likes purple flowers goes away. It becomes locally extirpated for whatever reason. And now all of a sudden you've got insects that like white flowers. And you come back after several generations and you realize that purple flowers are rare and the allele is only now in 5% of the population, and the white flower, the white allele, is now 95% of the population. That would be a change in allele frequencies. And what that also represents is a deeper understanding of what evolution is, right? And that is when we study Hardy-Weinberg, we're going to do an empirical test on a change in allele frequencies. So for the test coming up on Sunday, you'll want to know how to calculate allele frequencies. And like I said, Khan Academy's got some great videos out there on how to do that. I could do it. I usually do it in class but online I'll just send you the guys to those Khan Academy to learn how to calculate allele frequencies. And there's also you just Google it. You'll see lots of examples of how to do that. And it's also in the book, and the book does a very good job of showing you how to calculate allele frequencies. And so make sure you get some of that and practice it. I'll put up a couple practice problems with some solutions for you so you can actually practice calculating Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Okay, well, I think that's about it for this week. Like I said, we're already on week 2. Don't forget that test 1 and 2 are due on Sunday, this coming Sunday. And yeah, don't be late on those tests, because remember, if you get them done on time, bonus 10 points if you get all 8 tests done on time. Okay, well, enjoy this week, and let's try to go live sometime this week. I got to come up with a time that works for everybody, so if you got some suggestions, let me know. And also, if you have some suggestions for ways for me to deliver the content to you, please let me know. I'm always up for some suggestions. I keep kicking. I'm always trying to improve what we do here. Okay, enjoy, and have a good week.